The morning dew still clung to the white roses, each droplet a tiny prism catching the first slant of dawn. Solelay Malone knelt among them, her pruning shears snipping with the precision of a surgeon, though her hands bore the dirt of a mourner. 2 weeks ago, her father Victor Malone had slipped beyond her reach at 68, leaving behind this garden, his pride, his sanctuary, his whispered promise of beauty in a world that too often forgot it. The roses trembled under her touch, their petals soft as the vows they'd been planted to honor. Her wedding day, 15 years past, now a memory trampled by divorce papers and Ethan Carver's fleeing shadow. The air was still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and fading blooms, when a sound cut through, a crunch, sharp and deliberate, like bones snapping underfoot, expensive heels on the gravel path. Solelay didn't need to look up to know who it was. Only one person would dare to tread Victor's sacred ground, in shoes that screamed money over reverence. The shears paused, hovering above a thorned stem, as Tara Hensley's silhouette loomed into view, her shadow slicing across the flower bed like a guillotine. "Still digging in the mud, huh?" Tara's voice dripped with fake sweetness, a syrup that coated the tongue but left a bitter aftertaste. She stood there, 35 and polished to a sheen, Louboutin heels sinking into the soil, black skirt tailored tight, blonde hair swept back like she'd just stepped off a magazine cover. Soleil's knees ached against the cold ground, her jeans patched with earth, but she kept her eyes on the roses. White petals, Victor had said, were for new beginnings. All she saw was the stain of endings. "What do you want, Tara?" Soleil's words were quiet, clipped, the rustle of leaves louder than her voice. She snipped a wilted bloom, letting it fall like a discarded promise. Tara stepped closer, her heels grinding gravel into dust. "Oh, just a friendly visit. The will reading's tomorrow, you know. Ethan and I thought we should check in." Her red lips curled, a predator smile. "Victor's estate. It's quite the prize, isn't it?" Soleil's fingers tightened around the shears, the metal cool and heavy against her palm. Ethan, her ex-husband, 36 now, who'd traded their vows for Tara's bed 3 years ago. The man Victor had once called son, until the betrayal cracked that bond like frost on a petal. "A prize you think you deserve?" Solelay asked, her gaze still fixed on the roses, though her pulse thudded in her ears. Tara laughed, a sound like glass shattering on stone. "Deserve's got nothing to do with it, honey. It's about what's owed." She tilted her head, studying Solelay like a vulture sizing up carrion. "You'll see soon enough." The shears glinted in the dawn light, a silent vow of their own. Solelay stayed kneeling, but her spine straightened. Whatever Tara wanted, it wouldn't bloom here. Not in Victor's garden, not while she still drew breath. Tara's shadow stretched long and dark across the flower bed, a stain on the white roses that Solelay had tended since Victor's hands could no longer hold the shears. The air thickened, humming with the weight of words unspoken, betrayals unburied. Tara shifted her weight, one heel sinking deeper into the soil, a deliberate trespass, and her crimson lips twisted into a smirk that promised ruin. Solelay rose slowly, wiping soil-covered hands on her faded apron, the pruning shears dangling at her side like an unsheathed blade. "Ode?" Solelay echoed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Ethan walked out on me, on us, for you, and now you think Victor's estate belongs to you?" She faced Tara fully now, 32 years of grit meeting 35 years of gloss. Tara's perfume, sharp and floral, clashed with the garden's honest musk. "Ethan was like a son to Victor for 15 years, Tara said, her manicured hand waving dismissively, nails catching the light like talons. "Golf every Sunday, drinks at the club. Victor forgave him, you know, after your little mess." She paused, savoring the jab. "He couldn't stay mad at family." Soleil's grip on the shears tightened, the metal biting into her palm. "The same Ethan who cheated on his daughter with his secretary, that family?" Her words were a thorn, sharp and aimed true. Ethan's affair had unraveled her marriage. But Victor's forgiveness, those golf games until cancer stole him 2 weeks ago, still stung like salt in a wound. Ancient history, Tara snapped, her fake smile faltering for a heartbeat before snapping back into place. Victor knew what mattered, and tomorrow, when that will's read, Ethan and I will get our fair share. She stepped closer, her shadow swallowing the roses whole. This house, the company, it's ours as much as yours. This is my father's house, Solelay said, her voice rising like a wind through the trees. He built it brick by brick, planted every root, designed every corner. It's not about money, it's about legacy. The rage simmered now, a fire licking at her ribs, but she held it back, remembering Victor's words. A firm hand, Solelay, never a cruel one. Legacy? Tara snorted, a harsh, ugly sound. Wake up, sweetheart. Everything's about money. And your brother Caleb? He agrees with us. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. He's been very cooperative. Caleb, 34, her older brother, the one who'd barely looked at her at Victor's funeral, consoling Ethan instead. The mention sent a chill down Soleil's spine, cold as the dew beneath her boots. "You've spoken to Caleb?" she asked, her tone flat, masking the storm inside. "Oh, honey, we've done more than speak." Tara's grin was all teeth, a shark circling blood. He knows what's at stake. The shears felt heavier now, a weight begging to be swung. Solelay took a breath, steadying herself. "Get off my property, Tara," she said quietly. Each were deliberate. "Before I forget my manners." Tara laughed again, breaking glass on stone, and turned to leave. At the garden gate, she paused. "Start packing, Solelay. Ethan and I will need a month to renovate once we move in." Her heels clicked down the path, a retreating drumbeat of war. Solelay looked down at the roses, their white petals now spotted with soil where her trembling hands had crushed them. Victor had promised new beginnings, but all she saw was red. The growl of Tara's car engine faded into the distance, swallowed by the garden's quiet exhale. Solelay stood alone among the roses, their white blooms silvered by the rising sun, though the air still carried the sting of Tara's perfume. Her hands shook, soil crumbling from her fingers as she dropped the pruning shears beside a thorned stem. The weight of Tara's words, Ethan, Caleb, the estate, pressed against her chest, a stone she couldn't shift. Victor's garden stretched around her, a patchwork of memory and loss. Every petal a piece of him she wasn't ready to surrender. A glint caught her eye, a corner of damp paper poking from beneath a rose bush, half hidden among the thorns. She knelt, breath catching as she brushed the soil aside. An envelope, its edges softened by dew, bore her name in Victor's unmistakable scrawl. Bold, steady, the hand of a man who'd shaped her world brick by brick until cancer claimed him 2 weeks ago. Solelay lifted it with trembling fingers, its weight more than paper and ink, as if it held his voice, his will, his fight. She pulled out her phone, the screen cold against her palm. "Lila, it's me," she said when her best friend answered, 33 and fierce as ever. "Tara just paid me a visit. She's exactly as bad as we thought. Can you come over? There's something about the will I need to talk about." "I'll be there in 20, Lila replied, her voice a firm tether. "Hold tight, Solelay. Victor was smarter than they know." The call ended, and Solelay turned the envelope over in her hands, its damp surface cool against her skin. Whatever Tara and Ethan planned, Victor had left her something. A seed buried among the thorns, waiting to bloom. The garden's quiet lingered in Solelay Malone's ears as she stepped into Victor's study, the air thick with the ghost of pipe tobacco and the must of old books. The room was a sanctuary of memory, leather chair worn smooth by his hands, oak desk scarred with years of his plans, untouched since he'd slipped away at 68, 2 weeks gone. She clutched the damp envelope, its weight a lifeline against Tara Hensley's venomous promise of renovations that would erase him. The roses outside had been her battlefield, but here, in this room, she felt Victor's presence, steady as the roots he'd planted. The door creaked open, and Lila Brooks swept in, 33 and sharp-eyed, her legal briefcase in one hand and a bottle of Cabernet in the other. "Figured we might need this," she said, setting the wine on the desk with a heavy thunk, her smile a flicker of light in the gathering dusk. Solelay sank into the leather chair, its cool embrace cradling her as she turned the envelope over, Victor's scrawl stark against the paper. Solelay. "You haven't opened it yet," Lila noted, pouring 2 generous glasses, the wine's red glow catching the lamplight. "I wanted to wait for you," Solelay replied, her voice soft but firm, fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Inside, a single sheet and a small key gleamed like a promise. She unfolded the paper, and Victor's words filled the silence, her voice trembling as she read aloud. "My dearest Solelay, if you're reading this, someone's made a move on the estate. Knowing human nature, I'm guessing it's Tara, all flash and no heart." Lila snorted into her glass, a sound half laugh, half growl, as Solelay continued. "The key opens the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, you'll find everything to protect what's yours. Remember chess, Solelay. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn to save the queen. Love, Dad." Her breath hitched, the word dad a wound still raw, but Lila was already moving, gesturing to the desk. "Go on," she urged, her tone a mix of warmth and steel. Solelay slid the key into the lock, the soft click echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet room. The drawer groaned open, revealing a thick manila envelope and a USB drive nestled among shadows. She tipped the contents onto the desk. Photos spilled out like fallen petals. Tara, meeting a shadowed figure in a parking lot. Ethan Carver entering a lawyer's office not Lila's. Bank statements with numbers that twisted her gut. Email printouts plotting theft. "He had them followed," Solelay whispered, picking up a photo of Tara handing an envelope to Victor's nurse, the timestamp 2 days before his death. Lila perched on the desk's edge, her grin sharp as a blade. "Better. He had them investigated. That USB's got video. Her trying to bribe the nurse for will details." Soleil's hands shook as she traced a bank transfer, the evidence of Tara's embezzlement from Victor's company, Malone Industries, stark in black ink. "He knew," she said, looking up at Lila, whose nod was slow, deliberate. "6 months ago, right after his diagnosis, he came to me. Said he saw this coming, Ethan's weakness, Tara's greed. He planned it all." The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in with the weight of Victor's foresight. Solelay clutched the USB, its cold metal a tether to his voice. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked, and Lila's eyes darkened. "Before you look, the will reading tomorrow, he added a codicil 3 days before he died. Trust me, it changes everything." Solelay stared at the evidence spread before her, a garden of secrets Victor had cultivated, each piece a thorn to pierce Tara's schemes. Whatever trap he'd set, it was blooming now, and she was ready to tend it. Night draped Victor's house in a silver shroud, the moon casting long fingers across the garden where Solelay had faced Tara's venom hours before. She stood in the study, the evidence still scattered across the desk like a map of betrayal, when the door edged open. Caleb Carver slipped inside, 34 and looking like a man who'd fought a war and lost. His designer suit wrinkled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, a leather portfolio clutched like a shield. Solelay tensed, the sting of his absence at Victor's funeral, consoling Ethan instead of her, still fresh. "You look terrible," she said, breaking the ice, her voice sharper than she'd meant. "Yeah, well, playing double agent isn't as fun as the movies," Caleb replied, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He hesitated at the threshold, then stepped forward. Can I come in? Solelay nodded to the chair across from her, the desk a barricade between them. He slumped into it, nodding at the photos. I see you found Dad's insurance policy. She leaned forward, the air between them thick with unspoken years. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? The question cut deeper than she'd intended. 3 years of silence since her divorce flaring in her chest. Caleb sighed, opening the portfolio to reveal a check. $500,000, Tara's signature scrawled across it. Because I needed to make it right, he said, voice cracking. After the divorce, the way I sided with Ethan, I was an idiot, Solelay. You were my sister, and I failed you. He slid the check across the desk. Tara offered this to testify Dad wasn't sound when he made his final will. I took it straight to him instead. Solelay stared at the check, then at Caleb, her throat tightening. You didn't cash it, he shook his head. Dad wasn't angry, just disappointed. That's when he told me his plan. He pulled out a phone, pressing play. Tara's voice slithered into the room. Once the old man kicks it, we'll contest the will with your testimony about his mental state. Ethan's history with him seals it. We'll get everything. Soleil's fists clenched as Caleb fast-forwarded. Ethan now. Sell the house, liquidate it all. Solelay can crawl back to her little flower shop. She never deserved this. Turn it off, Solelay whispered, the words a punch to her gut. Caleb complied, then slid a document across the desk. There's more. Tara didn't just want the money, she wanted revenge on you, for making Ethan pay alimony, for catching them together. The paper showed bank transfers, embezzlement from Malone Industries, starting 6 months before Solelay found Ethan with Tara, his secretary of 3 years. She planned it all, Caleb said, voice low. Dad found out before his diagnosis was building a case. Then the cancer hit, and he switched to this. Solelay sank back, the chair creaking under her weight. She said you were helping them. Caleb's jaw tightened. I fed them just enough to keep them cocky, while Dad gathered this. He needed her to show her hand first. The grandfather clock chimed 9, each toll a heartbeat in the tense silence. I know I can't fix 3 years in one night, Caleb added, standing, but I'm here now, Solelay. Whatever happens tomorrow, I've got your back. He left the evidence on the desk, a bridge rebuilt with thorns, and Solelay watched him go, the pieces of Victor's puzzle clicking into place around her. Dawn broke bright and harsh over Victor's house, the study now a stage buzzing with Tara's hired camera crew, their lights glaring against the oak walls. Solelay stood by the window, the roses outside a silent witness to the chaos unfolding within. Tara swept in first, 35, and radiant in a black dress that screamed wealth. Ethan trailing behind, 36 and stiff in his tailored suit, eyes darting like a cornered animal. The crew adjusted lenses, capturing Tara's practiced poise as she bounced in her seat, a queen awaiting her crown. Solelay met Ethan's gaze briefly. He nodded, a ghost of their past flickering, then turned to Lila, who stood behind the desk, briefcase open, her grin a blade honed for battle. Places? Everyone, Lila muttered, straightening her jacket as she took her place. As Victor Malone's attorney, I'll read his last will and testament, along with any additional documents. Tara leaned forward, eyes gleaming. We're ready. Lila's voice cut through the hum. The estate, house, Malone Industries shares, divide 60% to Solelay Malone, 40% to Ethan Carver and Tara Hensley. Tara squealed, grabbing Ethan's arm. I knew it. Victor loved us too much to cut us out. However, Lila continued, her tone slicing Tara's triumph, there's a codicil, added 3 days before Victor's death at 68. Tara's smile faltered. What? Ethan shifted, nervous. A modification, Lila said, breaking the envelope's seal with a crack. Acceptance of any inheritance triggers a full investigation into financial irregularities preceding Victor's passing. The room froze, cameras whirring as Lila slid photos across the desk, Ethan with shady lawyers, Tara bribing the nurse. Or this USB video of attempted bribery, or these bank statements showing embezzlement from Malone Industries. Tara bolted up, chair toppling. "Turn those cameras off." Solelay stepped forward, voice calm. "No, they stay. You wanted this historic moment, remember?" Ethan grabbed a photo, color draining from his face. "Where'd you get these?" Caleb spoke from the corner, 34 and steady. "Dad's collection, including recordings of you planning to fake his mental decline." Tara whirled on him. "You were supposed to help us." Caleb shrugged. "I did. Just not you." Lila pressed play on a video, and Victor's voice boomed, thin but fierce from days before death. "If you're watching, you've shown your colors, just as I knew. Greed's a terrible teacher, but consequences are excellent students." Tara's mascara streaked as she backed toward the door. "This isn't over." Lila's reply was ice. "It is." "Police are in the foyer. Embezzlement evidence awaits." As Tara and Ethan were led away, cameras rolling, Solelay felt Victor's hand on her shoulder. His trap sprung, his legacy blooming in the chaos they'd sown. The garden lay silvered under a late afternoon sun, its white roses aloof as news vans swarmed the lawn, their engines humming like vultures circling prey. Inside Victor's study, Solelay Malone stood amidst the aftermath of the will reading, the desk still littered with photos and printouts, evidence of Tara Hensley and Ethan Carver's unraveling. The air buzzed with the faint echo of Tara's screams, but a sharper sound cut through. Lila Brooks's phone, vibrating against the oak with fresh updates. She burst through the door, 33 and electric, waving the device like a torch. "It gets better," Lila said, her voice tight with triumph. "The DA found offshore accounts, dummy corporations. Tara wasn't just stealing from Malone Industries. She's been running a fraud network for years." Soleil's stomach twisted as she sank into Victor's leather chair, its worn surface a steady anchor. "And Ethan?" she asked, unsure why she still cared about the man who'd betrayed her at 36. Lila's grin sharpened. "Singing like a canary, turns out he's not so loyal facing prison." Before Solelay could process that, a sharp knock interrupted, and a police detective entered, his face grim under the study's lamplight. "Miss Malone," he said, laying a folder on the desk. "We found this in Tara's apartment. She's not who she claims." Documents spilled out, birth certificates, passports, all with different names but Tara's face, 35 and unyielding. "Her real name's Denise Morrow," he continued, "wanted in 3 states. The FBI's been after her for a decade." Soleil's breath caught as she scanned the papers. The name, Denise Morrow, a cold blade against her spine. "Margaret Phillips," she whispered, recalling a Florida case. Murder, masked as accident. The detective nodded. "Same woman. Served 5 years for fraud, got out, changed her identity. Your father was her biggest target yet." He handed her a USB drive, its metal cool in her palm. "This is footage of Victor confronting her. Thought you'd want it." Lila was already on her phone, dialing the DA, as Solelay plugged the drive into Victor's computer. The screen flickered, and Victor's face appeared, thin, fierce, days from death at 68. "I know what you're planning, Denise," he said, his voice steel. "I've read your journal, you're finished. Everything you've done ends here." Denise's white-faced reply spat venom. "You're dying, you can't stop me." Victor's laugh was cold. "I already have, you just don't know it yet." The video cut out, leaving Solelay staring at the blank screen. Victor's trap, a root system she'd only begun to unearth. The courtroom pulsed with the gavel's thunder, its wooden walls amplifying the sound as Solelay Malone took the witness stand, the air thick with anticipation. A month had passed since the will reading, and now Denise Morrow, once Tara Hensley, stood rigid in an orange jumpsuit, her polished facade stripped away at 35. Ethan Carver slouched beside her, 36 and broken, his tailored suit replaced by the same prison hue. Reporters scribbled in the gallery, their pens scratching like thorns on bark, while the jury leaned forward, eyes locked on Solelay. Lila Brooks squeezed her hand as they rose, 33 and steady, whispering, "The evidence speaks. You don't have to." But Solelay shook her head, Victor's last letter echoing in her mind. "Don't let this harden your heart." Silence wasn't strength today. It was fear. "State your name," the prosecutor began, his voice cutting through the hum. "Solelay Malone," she replied, her gaze steady on Denise, whose eyes burned with hatred, a flicker of desperation beneath. "Tell us about your relationship with the defendants," he pressed. Solelay took a breath, the words rising like sap. "Ethan was my husband for 15 years. Tara, Denise, was his secretary, the woman he left me for. They married 6 months after our divorce, then started visiting my father, Victor, building trust while he was sick." The prosecutor held up Denise's apartment documents, their ink a map of malice. "When did you learn of these plans against your safety?" Denise's lawyer leapt up. "Objection, circumstantial." The prosecutor countered. "They detail intent to harm her post-inheritance." The judge's "overruled" was a crack of lightning. "After their arrest," Solelay said, her voice unwavering, "Dad suspected it. That's why he gathered evidence, changed his will. He protected me, even after he was gone." Denise surged to her feet, handcuffs rattling. "He was a manipulative old man who couldn't let his precious daughter lose." The judge barked, "Sit down, Miss Morrow," but she whirled on Solelay. "You think you've won? I made Ethan leave you. I destroyed your marriage, and I'll destroy everything else." Chaos erupted. Bailiffs lunged. Reporters gasped as Denise's threats rang out, caught on record. Ethan stared at his hands, shoulders caving, finally seeing her venom unmasked. The judge called a recess, and Lila steered Solelay into a private room, the hallway a blur of clamoring press. "That outburst sealed it," Lila said, shutting the door. "Did you see Ethan's face? He's done." Caleb joined them, 34 and resolute, closing out the noise. "He saw her for real this time." Solelay sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting like a storm. "Dad knew she'd crack when cornered," she said, and Lila nodded, phone buzzing. "DA's adding charges, 25 to 30 years for her, 10 to 15 for him with cooperation." Outside, the gavel's echo faded, but Victor's roses bloomed in Soleil's mind, their truth cutting through Denise's lies like shears through rot. The greenhouse glowed warm under a setting sun, its glass panes fogged with the breath of thriving orchids as Solelay Malone pushed open the door. The air wrapped her in a humid embrace, thick with the scent of flowers Victor had tended until his hands failed him at 68. 2 months since the courtroom, the chaos of Denise and Ethan's sentencing had settled, and Caleb had called her here with a surprise. The FBI finished processing the study, he'd said, handing her a small box from Victor's desk. Inside, a key and a note. "For when justice blooms, check the greenhouse." Now, she stood alone, the key cool in her palm, the space a sanctuary of memory she'd avoided since his death. In the center, Victor's workbench held a large envelope, her name in his bold scrawl. She opened it, a deed slipping free with another letter. "My dearest Solelay," she read, her voice soft in the stillness. "By now, justice has bloomed, and the truths come to light. But I grew more than flowers here. I grew hope for you to find your strength. This deed's for the lot next to your old flower shop, bought after I faced Denise. Malone Gardens shouldn't stay in one patch. Your gift for beauty deserves to grow. Some flowers bloom best after frost, Solelay. You've weathered your winter. Now bloom again." Love, Dad. Tears pricked her eyes as she clutched the deed, Victor's final gift rooting her future. I stood in the rare book section of City Central Library, the air thick with the scent of aged leather and dust, my fingers brushing the spine of a 17th century volume I'd been cataloging all afternoon. March 24th, 2025. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the high windows, gilding the shelves I'd spent years tending. Silence wrapped me like a second skin, until it didn't. Still hiding among your precious books? Tyler's voice sliced through the quiet, sharp as a paper cut. I glanced up to find my brother leaning against a shelf, his designer suit a garish splash against the muted tones of my world. That smirk of his hadn't changed since we were kids. Smug, like he'd already won some game I wasn't playing. "Hello, Tyler," I said, keeping my tone even as I slid the book back into its protective case. "I didn't expect you here." My cardigan felt suddenly dowdy next to his tailored perfection, but I didn't flinch. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks with a flourish that screamed money. "Mom sent me. She's worried you'll embarrass us at their anniversary party tonight, though." He cast a disdainful glance around. "I suppose it's too late for that." The library, my sanctuary, shrank under his gaze, but I met his eyes without blinking. "I'll be there," I assured him, standing to my full height. Even in flats, he towered over me, a fact he never let me forget. "And I'll dress appropriately." His grin widened, all teeth and no warmth. "See that you do. It's a big night. I've got news. Dad's golf buddies will eat it up." I nodded, letting him think I was impressed. The leather case clicked shut under my fingers, a small sound that steadied me. Tyler didn't notice the way my hands lingered, or the calm that masked something sharper beneath. He never did. "Don't trip over a book on your way out," he tossed over his shoulder as he sauntered off, leaving me alone again. I exhaled, already counting the hours until I'd turn his world upside down. Tyler lingered by the stacks a moment longer, his Rolex catching the light as he turned back to me. "Bought my third company this year," he said, voice dripping with pride. "Bennett Enterprises is a conglomerate now. Dad's over the moon, says I'm a real businessman." I nodded, feeling my hands tighten just enough to betray me if he'd been paying attention. He wasn't. "That's wonderful," I said, the words smooth as polished wood. "Congratulations." He didn't bother making his thanks sound sincere, just tilted his head like he was sizing up a disappointment. "You know, Lennox, there's still time to join the real world." He gestured vaguely at the shelves. "I could use someone to manage our corporate library. At least then you'd be doing something useful with all this." He paused, sneering. "Knowledge." The way he said it made it sound like a stain I couldn't wash out. I smiled, thinking of the laptop locked in my office safe, the meetings I'd taken under a name he'd never guess. "I'm happy where I am," I told him, letting the words hang between us like a challenge he didn't hear. He shrugged, already turning away. "Your loss. 7 sharp tonight. And Lennox?" He paused at the exit, smirking again. "Try not to bring any books this time." I watched him go, his footsteps echoing off the marble floor. The library settled back into its hush, but my pulse didn't. Tyler thought he knew me. Thought I was the Bennett family's quiet failure, the 32-year-old sister who'd chosen ink over ambition. He'd never bothered to look closer, and that was fine. By tomorrow, he'd see just how wrong he'd been. I straightened my cardigan and headed for my office, the weight of my secret settling comfortably on my shoulders. I waited 5 minutes after Tyler left, long enough to be sure he wouldn't double back, before locking my office door. The space was modest, walls lined with books, desk scarred from decades of use. To anyone else, it screamed librarian, exactly as I intended. They never noticed the security system humming quietly in the corner, or the fact that my ancient desktop hid a custom-built core that could outpace most corporate servers. I opened my safe, pulled out the encrypted laptop, and powered it up. 3 windows snapped open. Video calls from Tokyo, London, New York. My real life flickered to the surface. "Good morning, Miss Maxwell. Grace Harper's voice came through, crisp and efficient. My assistant at 29 was sharper than most CEOs I'd met. The Nakamura deal is ready for final review. I scanned the documents on my screen, numbers and terms I'd memorized months ago. Thank you, Grace, I said, my voice steady. Has legal finished their assessment? She nodded. Yes, ma'am. The acquisition terms are solid. We can move whenever you're ready. I glanced at my watch. 5 hours until the party. Plenty of time. Schedule the signing for tomorrow morning, I instructed. And make sure everything's in place for the announcement. Already done, Grace replied, then hesitated. Are you sure about the timing? I thought of Tyler's smug face, the years of him dismissing me as the bookish Bennett, who'd never amount to much. Yes, I said, a quiet edge creeping in. Tomorrow morning will be perfect. I ended the call and leaned back, staring at the empire I'd built in the shadows. Maxwell Global Partners, no relation to Tyler's Bennett Enterprises, despite the echo, was one of the world's largest private equity firms. For 7 years, I'd run it while shelving books, a cover I didn't just tolerate, I loved. Who'd suspect a librarian of rewriting global finance? The salon was empty when I arrived, a perk of owning the building and keeping a standing private appointment. Stella Ortiz, my stylist and one of the few who knew my secret, waited with a grin. The usual? She asked, gesturing to a chair. Something more formal today, I said, settling in. Family event. She nodded knowingly. Ah, the famous Bennett anniversary party. Tyler was in earlier, talking it up to anyone who'd listen. I smirked, pulling out my secure phone to check emails. I'm sure he was. As Stella worked, I scrolled through updates on the Nakamura acquisition. By tomorrow, Maxwell Global Partners would own one of Asia's biggest tech manufacturers, the same one Tyler had been chasing for months. Your brother mentioned he's buying some big company, Stella said, catching my eye in the mirror. Couldn't stop bragging. I kept my expression neutral. He's trying to buy it. There's a difference. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. You didn't... I smiled, just enough to keep her guessing. Let's just say tomorrow's papers will be interesting. I tucked the phone away as Stella finished, my hair now sleek and elegant, fit for the part I'd play tonight. The dress waited at home, a deep green number I'd had tailored to perfection. Not flashy, but expensive in the way old money noticed. I'd look like the Lennox they expected, the bookish sister making an effort. They'd never see the billionaire beneath, not until I wanted them to. I pulled up to the Bennett family estate in my Audi, the engine's hum a soft contrast to the roar of Bentleys and Cadillacs lining the circular drive. March 24th, 2025, evening shadows stretched across the lawn, the mansion ablaze with lights, like a jewel box, pried open for display. I'd chosen the car carefully, nice enough to dodge Mom's sighs, modest enough to keep questions off my librarian's salary. Henry Dawson, our butler since I was in pigtails, met me at the door, his nod as crisp as his suit. Miss Maxwell, he said, voice warm but formal, your parents are in the main hall. I stepped inside, the murmur of wealth washing over me, crystal clinking, a string quartet weaving through the air. Mom spotted me first. Margaret Bennett, 58 and still the picture of grace, glided over in a gown that cost more than my monthly rent, or so she thought. Darling, you look presentable, she said, her air kiss brushing my cheek. High praise from her, considering she'd never forgiven me for choosing books over boardrooms. Happy anniversary, Mom, I replied, returning the gesture. You look beautiful. She did, her elegance a shield against time. Dad's voice boomed across the hall before she could answer. There's my girl! Charles Bennett, 60 and tipsy already, waved me over to his circle of golf buddies. I wove through the crowd, dodging air kisses and polite nods about my little job. Walter Grayson, all silver hair and superiority, grinned as I reached them. Still messing with those books, Lennox? His tone made it clear what he thought of that. Someone has to preserve knowledge, I said, keeping my smile mild. They chuckled, indulgent, like I was a child with a quirky hobby. I let them laugh, my green dress catching the light just enough to fit their expectations. The night was young, and I had a role to play. The party hummed along, a sea of tailored suits and glittering jewels, until Tyler decided it was his stage. I stood near the fireplace, sipping champagne, when he raised his glass and called out, "Everyone!" The room quieted, heads turning to my brother, 35, and basking in it. His suit was new, sharper than the one he'd worn in the library, his Rolex flashing as he gestured. "I'd like to make an announcement," he said, voice carrying over the quartet's last notes. I leaned against the mantel, watching him play the Prince of Bennett Enterprises. "As some of you know, Bennett Enterprises has been growing fast this year," he began, pausing for effect. "Today, I'm proud to announce we're on the verge of our biggest acquisition yet. By next week, we'll own Nakamura Tech." The room erupted, claps, cheers, Dad beaming like Tyler had hung the moon. Mom dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, her pride a quiet echo of Dad's roar. "Wonderful, son!" Charles bellowed, clapping Tyler on the back. "A real businessman, just like your old man." I sipped my drink, letting the bubbles fizz against my tongue, the only sound I made. Tyler wasn't done. "The deal's not quite final," he added, grinning, "but my sources say it's just a matter of time. Papers are ready to sign." More applause, a wave of congratulations rolling toward him. He lapped it up, shaking hands, accepting praise, like it was his birthright. Then his gaze landed on me, sharp and smug. "What do you think, little sister?" he asked, his tone thick with condescension. "Ready to admit you backed the wrong horse?" The crowd tittered, eyes flicking to me, the bookish Bennett who'd never measure up. I met his stare, calm as the library at dawn. "I think," I said, pausing to let the words settle, "you shouldn't count your chickens before they hatch." He laughed, loud and dismissive, and the room followed, a chorus of indulgence. "Always so cautious, Lennox," he said, shaking his head. "That's why you'll never be more than what you are, hiding in your library while we build empires." I raised my glass slightly, a toast he didn't understand. LED channels flickered as I waited for him to turn away, but I stayed by the mantel, the fire's warmth a steady pulse against my back. Tyler thought he had me cornered. He had no idea what was coming. Dinner was served in the dining room, a masterpiece of mahogany and candlelight, the table set with china older than the house itself. I took my seat at the far end, a spot Mom had chosen to keep me from the important guests. The first course arrived, some delicate soup I barely tasted, as Tyler held court near Dad, regaling the table with tales of his business prowess. I kept quiet, spooning broth, nodding politely when someone remembered I was there. The air was thick with subtle insults, the kind I'd learned to let slide off me like rain on glass. Eleanor Grayson, seated beside me, leaned in, her perfume sharp and floral. "I just don't understand," she said, her voice low, pitying. "You were so bright in school, you could have done anything. Why waste your life with books?" She shook her head, her diamond earrings glinting. I set my spoon down, considering her question. In 12 hours, everything would shift, but for now, I stayed in character. "Books are never a waste," I said simply. "They teach us things aren't always what they seem." She frowned, clearly disappointed, and turned back to her soup. Across the table, Tyler's voice rose, recounting a deal he'd closed in Dubai. "The sheikh didn't know what hit him," he said, grinning as Dad laughed, a little too loud from the wine. Mom smiled tightly, her gaze flitting to me now and then, like she was checking I wouldn't ruin the night. "Lennox," she called down the table, "do try to mingle later." The Graysons brought their son, such a catch. I nodded, biting back a retort. They'd been shoving eligible bachelors at me for years, as if a husband could fix my failure. Walter Grayson chimed in from Dad's end. "Still at that library, eh? What's the pay like these days?" His chuckle invited others to join, a familiar hum of amusement. "Enough," I said, my voice mild, thinking of the penthouse I'd never let them see. It suits me. Tyler caught my eye, smirking. Suits you to hide, you mean, he said. And the table laughed again, softer this time. I sipped my water, tasting victory they couldn't imagine. As dessert came, chocolate tarts with gold leaf, Tyler stood, glass raised. A toast, he announced, to Mom and Dad, who taught me what success looks like. And to my sister, who, well, proves not everyone's cut out for the family business. The room chuckled politely. I lifted my glass, meeting his gaze, thinking of the press release set for morning. 12 hours, I told myself. 12 hours, and they'd choke on that laughter. The party thinned out by the dessert table, the quartet packing up as guests drifted toward the bar or the exit. I stood there picking at a truffle when Tyler sauntered over, his tie loosened, champagne flute dangling from his fingers. Enjoying the party? He asked, his voice slick with smugness. I popped the truffle in my mouth, letting the chocolate melt before I answered. It's lovely, I said, keeping my tone light. Mom and Dad must be so proud. His chest puffed out, the Rolex glinting as he straightened his tie. They are, he said, leaning closer. Would have been nice if both their kids amounted to something, though. His eyes flicked over me, taking in the green dress. Elegant, sure, but not his kind of flash. I selected another truffle, rolling it between my fingers, unbothered. You know, Tyler, I said, examining the candy like it held secrets. Success isn't always about making the most noise. He snorted, loud enough to turn a few heads. No? Tell that to my bank account. How much does a librarian make these days anyway? I glanced at my Louboutins, a quiet indulgence he'd never clock. Enough to buy these shoes, I said, meeting his gaze. He blinked, then laughed, dismissing it. Right, you're good with money, should have guessed. He downed his champagne in one gulp, the glass clinking as he set it on the table. Well, this has been fun, but I should mingle. Big day tomorrow. The Nakamura deal won't close itself. He grinned, like he'd already signed the papers, and turned to go. I pulled my phone from my clutch, the screen lighting up as I typed a quick text to Grace. Everything ready for morning? Her reply buzzed back instantly. All set. Press release at 9 a.m. sharp. Want the final numbers? I tapped back. No need. I'll see them in the papers. Slipping the phone away, I watched Tyler work the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud. He thought tomorrow was his triumph, his name in bold print. I finished the truffle, savoring the bittersweet edge. He'd wake up to headlines all right, just not the ones he expected. The clock above the mantel read 11:45. I said my goodbyes, enduring one last round of pitying smiles. Do consider Tyler's offer, dear, Mom whispered, her cheek cool against mine. I drove home in the Audi, the estate's lights fading in my rear view. Tomorrow, they'd learn what I'd built while they mocked me, the librarian who'd outplayed them all. I smiled into the dark, the road stretching out like a promise. I stepped into the library at 8 a.m., sharp, March 25th, 2025, my sensible shoes tapping against the marble floor. The regulars nodded their hellos, same as always, oblivious to the storm I'd unleashed. I'd kept my routine for 7 years, and today was no different, on the surface. Grace waited in my office, her tablet glowing as I locked the door behind me. Everything's ready, she said quietly, her voice steady as ever. Lawyers are in Tokyo. Press release goes out in 45 minutes. I set my bag down, powered up the encrypted laptop, and nodded. Any word from Tyler's team? She smirked. They're still expecting to close Nakamura this morning. His lawyers are setting up now. I smiled, imagining his face when the rug slipped out from under him. At 8:55, my private line rang. Miss Maxwell, Mr. Nakamura's translator said, everyone's in position. Excellent, I replied. Let's proceed. Signatures flashed across my screen, a blur of confirmations sealing Maxwell Global Partners' ownership of Nakamura Tech. Patents, subsidiaries, and all. By 9 o'clock, it was done. Grace tapped her tablet. Press release out now. I pulled up news sites, watching the story break. Mystery buyer acquires Nakamura Tech. Maxwell Global Partners founder revealed. My phone buzzed. Tyler, predictably first. What the hell is this? He roared, no preamble. Some sick joke? I leaned back, calm as the shelves around me. Good morning to you too, brother. I take it you've seen the news? This is impossible, he sputtered. Maxwell Global Partners, you're not the founder. Actually, I am, I said, letting the words sink in. Have been for 7 years. I understand your confusion, though. After all, I'm just a librarian, right? Silence stretched, broken by papers rustling, his breath jagged. But I had a deal. The paperwork was ready. Was it? I asked, voice soft, innocent. You might want to check the fine print. Nakamura's been mine for months. His voice cracked. Who's we? My team, my company, my empire? I said, pausing between each. The one I built while you mocked me. The line went dead. I glanced at Grace, who hid a grin. How long until my parents call? She checked her watch. 3, 2. Right on cue, Mom's number flashed on my screen, her voice shrill enough to rattle the glass. Lennox Marie Maxwell, what have you done? I held the phone an inch from my ear, her panic crackling through. Good morning, Mom, I said, unruffled. I'm a bit busy. Can we discuss this over dinner? Dinner, she shrieked. Do you have any idea what's happening? Your father's phone won't stop ringing. The Graysons, the club, everyone wants to know how our librarian daughter built a multi-billion-dollar company. I heard Dad in the background shouting, Tell her to get over here now. I smiled, tracing a scratch on my desk. I've got meetings all day, I said, which was true. Nakamura was just the start. But I'd love to host you at my place tonight. Say, 7 o'clock? Your place? Mom's suspicion dripped through the line. You mean that cramped apartment by the library? No, I corrected. My penthouse on Highland Avenue. I'll text you the address. A long pause followed. Highland Avenue? She said, slower now. That's the most expensive building in the city. Is it? I replied, feigning surprise. I hadn't noticed. See you at 7 o'clock, I hung up, exhaling as 7 years of secrets spilled into the open. Grace raised an eyebrow. Ready for phase 2? I nodded. Send the second press release. She tapped her tablet, and I watched the next wave hit. Maxwell Global Partners announces $50 billion merger with East Asian tech giants. The merger had been brewing for months, timed to follow Nakamura like a 1-2 punch. By tonight, the business world would reel, and my family would face the daughter they dismissed. I stood, smoothing my sweater, and glanced out the window at the city I'd quietly conquered. Meetings stretched ahead, interviews, strategy calls, but I'd carved out dinner for them. They deserved to see the view from the top, even if it bruised their pride first. At 7 p.m., the penthouse elevator chimed, and Tyler stormed in, his swagger replaced by fury. Mom and Dad trailed behind, shell-shocked, with Henry Dawson hovering, unsure how to square this with the Lennox he'd known. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city's glow, my dining table set with understated elegance, catered by a restaurant I owned, naturally. Welcome to my home, I said, gesturing to the view. Drink? Tyler ignored the offer, fists clenched. How long have you been lying to us? I moved to the bar, pouring a scotch, my movements deliberate. Lying, I said, turning to face him. I never lied. I'm a librarian. I love books. I just happen to run a global empire, too. But why? Mom sank onto my leather sofa, her voice trembling. Why the deception? Why let us think you'd failed? I sipped my drink, letting her question hang. Maybe because you never looked past your assumptions, I said finally. You saw the disappointing daughter who chose books over business. I let you. Dad stood by the window staring at the skyline. All this time, he murmured. Those mysterious acquisitions, that was you? Tyler cut in, flat and hard. Maxwell Global Partners. The shadow empire reshaping the market. I smiled. It has a nice ring, doesn't it? Though I prefer knowledge empire. You taught me that, Dad. Knowledge is power. He turned, and for the first time, I saw respect in his eyes. "The Nakamura deal," he said slowly. "How long?" "6 months," I replied. "I've owned their subsidiaries for a year. Tyler never wondered why they kept delaying him." My brother's face flushed, then paled. "You outplayed me," he said, voice tight. "Not playing," I corrected. "Competing. Isn't that what you wanted?" Dinner arrived, and we sat, tension thick as the sterling silver knives sliced through the silence. "What now?" Tyler asked, pushing food around his plate. "Buy out Bennett Enterprises?" I nodded to Grace, who slid him a folder. "A partnership," I said. "Your company has bones, mine has vision. Together we could build something bigger." "You'd work with me?" he said, incredulous. "If you drop the ego and see value where you missed it," I replied. Dad set down his fork. "She's right, Tyler, this is a chance." Mom dabbed her eyes. "All those times we pitied you," she whispered. I softened. "It's time to focus on substance, not appearances." By dessert, Tyler thawed, sketching ideas for our merger. Dad watched me, pride replacing his old bluster. I'd built this alone, but maybe they could join me now, if they learned the lesson. March 26th, 2025, I walked into the library at 8 a.m., nodding to the regulars in their usual spots. My face splashed across headlines: Lennox Maxwell, librarian turned billionaire. But they treated me the same, their quiet "good morning," a comfort. I shelved a book, its weight familiar in my hands, as my phone buzzed. Tyler. "Let's talk partnership." I smiled, whispering to myself, knowledge comes in many forms. 7 years of secrets had paid off, not in flash, but in something real. I was still a librarian, still loved books. I just happened to be a billionaire too. That was enough.